Corporations loom large, but the boot on the neck of the working man looms larger. The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. In Netrunner, you either become a money-hungry, monolithic leviathan that is a corporation in this capitalist hellscape, or you become a hacker, a Netrunner, who, like a mouse in the walls, scurries around the corporation, eating away at their foundations, narrowly escaping the press of their boot. The most important thing to know about Netrunner is that it's entirely asymmetrical. That means that unlike other games like Magic the Gathering, where everyone can play the same cards and has a similar sort of setup, you know, everyone has a take a card, play monsters, attack, that sort of turn. The turns and the way that you play in Netrunner are totally different dependent on whether you play as a Netrunner or as one of the corporations. They use entirely different decks with entirely different cards, entirely different abilities, different ways to win, different ways to lose, and probably the most important difference between the two of them is that the runner always plays their cards face up, so the corp knows what they're up against, but the corp gets to place their cards face down. So when the runner goes up against them, they're not always sure what they're going to encounter. Generally, a game will work like this. The corporation wins by protecting and scoring these agenda cards, which kind of give them victory points. They have to place them down and then protect them with ice, which is kind of like a firewall. The runner then has to try and hack into these servers that the corporation sets up, break through the ice with their cards, and steal that agenda for themselves, allowing them to gain the victory points instead. It's a relatively unique setup for a card game because one player is always on the defensive. They're trying to set up a fortress, while the other player is always on the offensive, trying to break down those walls. But there's a couple of quirks in Netrunner that make it just so much more creative, unique, and fun to play. For one, the Netrunner's not always going to turn up this card and find agendas in these servers. No, the corporation can lay devastating traps for the runner, destroying their hand, getting rid of their cards, dealing brain damage. So part of the way that you play as the corp is trying to mislead and bluff them as to where you're keeping your agendas, where you're trying to score points, so that they don't know where to attack. And because the corporation gets to place their cards face down, the runner, when they're coming up against them, doesn't always know what they're going to find, and then they turn it over, and oh no! I can't stop it, I haven't got the tools, I haven't got the programs, and it does 3 net damage. So, for the runner, it's a game of hedging your bets, trying to figure out now's the time to strike. You're never going to be able to respond to every kind of ice they can put down, but you've got to run before the corporation gets too powerful. Mechanically, Netrunner is really creative, but I think that what sets it apart from other card games like Magic the Gathering even more is that you are much less dependent on the cards that you draw. And that's because the setup that you create, the cards that you get down on the board, cannot be so easily destroyed by your opponent in 1 or 2 turns. A plan that you build up to for ages and it's just over, it's just gone. Seeing a massive monster come out on the board can mean game over in a couple of turns, but equally, your massive monster that you paid everything to get can be murdered with a really cheap card, and that's just your whole plan gone. Netrunner is not nearly as temperamental. The ice that the corporation puts out cannot be destroyed by the Netrunner, and the Netrunner's programs and hardware and resources are pretty hard for the corporation to destroy. It won't happen very often in a game. You're not really waiting for a big, powerful card to win you the game. In other words, because plans are not dependent on and cannot be so easily undone by chance, Netrunner is a game that's a lot more dependent on your planning and your skill. Now, to be fair, this does mean that Netrunner is probably a slower paced game than you might be used to. You know, it doesn't have that constant boom and collapse that comes from cards rapidly entering the battlefield and exiting the battlefield in exciting moments. And that is exciting, don't get me wrong, but it's not what this game is so much about. There is instead this rising tension across the game, you know, where choosing your moment is really important. It's crucial. If I make a run now, he won't put down another piece of ice to defend that agenda. But I might not have enough to get through whatever that card is. At its heart, Netrunner is a game about bluffing and choosing your moment to strike. And I think that's a wonderful shift away from other card games where it's just about knowing and learning a million keywords. I'm about to win! I attack your monster! It's weak right now! Aha! But it's got Bedazzle! Well, what does that mean? It means I do 10 damage without paying for it? Ugh. Well, how was I meant to know that? It doesn't even say it on the card. Yeah, anyway, I attack you and I win now. The slow pace doesn't mean that there aren't those same aha, I got you moments, because there are. There are great feedback loops for the runner and the corp, when the runner gets through the ice and manages to steal an agenda or destroy a valuable card. And it's incredibly satisfying when the runner spends all of their money and all of their actions on trying to get through your ice, and then suddenly it's a trap and they get damaged. They lose all their cards. That's also really great. But those are things you build to over several turns gradually. They're not something that you'll keep in your hand and then throw down on the table so much. This is all complemented by something that I find pretty important in games, and that's theme. I like games that disguise the maths that I am doing, and Netrunner, it totally succeeds at this. The designers went out of their way to use terms that really reinforce this cyberpunk theme. You know, they kind of get you to think about the stuff that you're doing in cyberpunk terms. They took a lot of the words, by the way, from William Gibson's Neuromancer, a book that I reviewed and you can go watch up in the corner right now or after the video. It's stuff like ice, icebreaker, stack, rig, Netrunner, the names of quite a number of the cards. I actually read it and I was like, hey, I recognize that. So it is really a gorgeous game thematically, and I really like that. But I think even more so, what makes Netrunner so immersive as a game is the asymmetricality, again, between the runner and the corp. Because the different styles of play really embody the differences between them in the world itself. The big lumbering corporation only gets 3 actions per turn because it's a bigger, slower entity, while the independent, fast-thinking Netrunner gets 4. The runner can lose when they take brain damage and die because they're hooking their mind into this machine. The corporation, on the other hand, is trying to track the runner down. They're trying to put these tracking tokens on the other player because they live in secret. They're trying to find them. I will admit that there is one element of the gameplay that is weirdly unthematic, and that's that it's, oddly enough, easier to get rich as the Netrunner than it is as the corporation. And that's kind of a consequence of how the game works. If the corp also had a crap ton of money, then there would be no way for the Netrunner to win. But it is still kind of strange, and I still play it and I go, I wish there was a way for the corp to be the one with the money. It feels weird when you win as the Netrunner because you outspend the corporation. I mean, you should really win through subterfuge, shouldn't you? However, it does need to be said that Netrunner is not an even-handed game. It is harder to play as the corporation than it is to play as the runner. It's harder to learn the strategy for playing the corp, when and which cards you should play. The runner has the advantage in the early game because the corp can't defend everything that they need to protect, and in the late game they can break through almost anything. You have a narrower window of victory in the middle of the game. Now, this isn't a bad thing by itself, but it can feel unfair, especially when you're learning, and it magnifies any skill differences between you and the other player that you're playing up against. And some people do like games where it's always going to be even-handed, no matter which faction you choose to play with, especially if you like one playstyle more, but it's always harder to win. That would kind of suck. But I think, just like in this monster, Scythe, not every faction is, equally powerful. There are clearly a couple of factions in Scythe, one of the most popular games in the world, which are better than others. And that's okay, It creates a different strategy, it creates a different challenge, and it's just important to recognize that winning as the corporation is more of an achievement in many ways than winning as the runner. Connected to this is the problem of steamrolling. I have noticed that if one side gets a card that gets them a lot of money early in the game, then they do tend to win a lot more easily, because the only way to stop them is by spending money, and it just creates this cycle where, you'll go up against them, you'll fail, they'll get more money, you'll get less, and then the game's over from that point. But I mean, that is partly the nature of card games. There's always going to be an element of that when there's resource management. And I think it's worth remembering that you always play for the good games, not the occasional bad one. Now, Netrunner is a pretty deep and complicated game, which can make it really hard to teach, because obviously you're playing asymmetrically as well. You're putting down your cards in one way and they're going, well, where do I put mine? You go, well, you've got to find this card and put it down in this position. It can be a bit difficult. But complexity isn't a bad thing. Spirit Island is an immensely complex game to learn and play well, but it is consistently the one that everyone I teach it to wants to play again. But it does mean that Netrunner is not just a casual game that you can whip out with anyone, teach them in 10 minutes and have a good game of it. It will take a few games to get used to, so it's a lot better if you have someone that you can regularly play with, a partner or a close friend who likes these sorts of games. I do tend to find that. And of course, Netrunner is only a 2-player game, so if you only have your partner or a friend to play with, then this may be better. A lot of games are designed to be better with more and more people, and it can be hard to get a whole group together that can consistently, play. But Netrunner is designed for 2 players. It is how it works best. That's when it's most fun. So getting another card game which is designed for more may not be the best option when you could go for this. The base game also comes with several different runners and different corporations that you can play with, which all have, again, different play styles, different strengths and weaknesses. But deck building in Netrunner is a lot more restricted, or perhaps complicated, than it is in a lot of games. And the game is not designed around encouraging you to create your own deck so much, which I appreciate that a lot of other people really do like. And that's okay. So if you are a deck builder, you can create your own decks in Netrunner, but it's not really the same as you might be used to. I think Netrunner is for people who like card games but want one that allows them to plan out and deliver on their plans more, to see what they build up pay off. Building a more elaborate economy and strategy than Magic or Hearthstone allow you to at the moment. And who don't want, expensive plans blown apart in a single turn by a cheap card that you could not have seen coming. It's probably not for the people who love that fast-paced, bombastic, throwing cards down, getting them on the board, getting them off the board, that instant cycle that a lot of people really love. If you like that, then maybe not for you. We're being flexible and having backup plan after backup plan after backup plan is key to winning. It is for people who love the cyberpunk genre and want to see a game that truly replicates its themes. I think it should be pretty obvious that I totally recommend it personally, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the game and your thoughts on Magic and Hearthstone and other games, like whether you feel I'm at all being fair to them. Let me know down below. Hope you enjoyed this review. Stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.